Top 11 Ultra Dark Batman the Animated Series Villains with Tragically Sad Histories. Batman, the animated series is an important stepping stone in the entire legacy of Batman, as it served as the very crux of what made Batman who he is today. This animated series has some of the best villains to exist in the DC animated universe, with some of the most tragic pasts and backstories. We see a range of darkness in all these characters, whether it is a rare disease, a dying wife, an experiment gone wrong, a tragic accident, and many more such things that make you wonder how every villain has an origin story that makes them who they are. In this video, we will explore such 11 villains from the Batman the Animated Series who were the victims of their own circumstances. Let's begin, shall we? Number 1. Clayface.
There is no Hagen. It's only me now. Clayface.
Clayface, who was previously known by his real name, Matt Hagen, was an actor who worked for Imperial Pictures. However, things were not the same after a car accident that left him completely disfigured. While in recovery, he was approached by a corrupt industrialist who promised to restore his young look through a compound called Renew, which was pronounced as Renew, but the catch was the payment. It eventually forced Hagen to comply and execute certain illegal activities, desperate to get this compound. After things went haywire and an entire vat of chemical was poured onto Hagen, he turned into a bulky and misshapen clay-like form, which possessed the ability to shapeshift. While Matt Hagen was a simple, good-looking actor, Clayface was a lot more powerful and had a very unique cell structure. However, his acting skills helped him impersonate people every time he shapeshifted into someone new. He could also absorb different objects and was able to extend his limbs and control his own shape and size. He appeared in a total of 6 episodes, out of which one had a small cameo. Number 2. Mr. Freeze. Before we go forward, please subscribe to us. Your small click will help us in a huge way to produce more videos for you. Let's continue.
The snow is beautiful, don't you think? Clean, uncompromising.
A scientist turned criminal is the best way to describe the life of Victor Fries, whose life took a wrong, tragic turn, turning him into Mr. Freeze. Fries was a scientist who worked at Gothcorp and had a wife who was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He was determined to save her life, and so began experimenting using Gothcorp funds. When the CEO found out, he decided to shut the experiment, pushing Fries into a batch of chemicals and leaving him to die. Even though he survived, his body had now completely changed and couldn't survive in temperatures of 0 degrees, and this incident turned him into a criminal mastermind. He built a cryo suit which helped him survive different temperatures and also increased his strength. Mr. Freeze was now determined to seek revenge on Gothcorp and its CEO, which eventually led to his first run-in against Batman, who he easily beat by trapping him in a block of ice. Despite that, Freeze was eventually put into a cell in Arkham Asylum, but it wasn't long until he was broken out without his consent. Mr. Freeze is one of the few villains in the animated series whose actions are not for his own profit, but for revenge only. He appears in a total of 2 episodes in one film. Number 3. Clock King.
I've studied news footage of you, and I know that it takes you exactly a 20th of a second to throw a punch.
The Clock King or Temple Fugate has his name derived from the Latin phrase tempus fugit, which quite literally means time flies. His name was recreated to Temple Fugate, especially for the show. What might look like an obsessive-compulsive disorder is truly just an odd and lonely man who is obsessed with time and the idea of it. Every second of his life is planned. The one time he decided to go off schedule and relax, everything that could go wrong, went wrong. He was then determined to take revenge on the person whose advice led to him being late, and in his mind, that's what led to his bankruptcy. 7 years after that incident, Temple went on to become the Clock King, turning to a life of crime and revenge. He had spent a long time perfecting his skills and learning every single of Batman, so that when he was against him, he would put a good and fair fight, which he did. Even though he doesn't have any superpowers, his knowledge of time, along with explosive pocket watches and a sword shaped like a clock's hand, is more than enough to make him a supervillain. He appears in a total of 2 episodes of the animated series. Number 4. I Ken.
Gotten a second wind, have you? Good. This will make your defeat all the more satisfying.
I Ken was a villain who was more popularly known as the Ninja. The name links to his skills and personality. He was a skilled ninja and an antagonist of Bruce Wayne. He began his journey in Japan, where he was Sensei Yoru's best student. Despite being great at martial arts, he never put these skills to good use, it was always dishonorable. Kayadai used to steal and one fine day decided to steal his master's sword, but was confronted by Bruce Wayne. This eventually led to Yoru expelling Kayadai, which forced him to relocate. Years after this incident, Kayadai realized it was time to get his revenge on Bruce Wayne, and so he traveled to Gotham City. After a brief showdown with Bruce Wayne, who had revealed himself to be Batman, Kayadai managed to escape and eventually returned to Japan, where he was adamant about learning Yoru's ultimate technique, which sent him on yet another dishonest journey. He appears in a total of 2 episodes of Batman, the animated series. Number 5. Man-Bat.
I knew we'd discovered a formula to create a totally new species, neither man nor bat.
Man-Bat is the classic example of a scientific experiment gone wrong, a trope we often see in superhero films, shows, and comics. Much like the others, Dr. Kirk Langstorm was a scientist who worked at the Gotham City Zoo as a zoologist. His more recent experiment revolved around bats and trying to replicate their long lives. Once he tested the serum on himself, that's what led to the creation of the notorious Man-Bat. He eventually catches the attention of the Gotham police force, but luck is in his favor when they believe that the crimes were committed by Batman instead. However, after a brief encounter with Batman, where Langstorm reveals his true identity, Batman takes him to the Batcave, where he finds a cure and reverses the transformation for good. Apart from being an intelligent scientist, as a Man-Bat, Langstorm possesses qualities of both a man and a bat. He has superhuman strength and gains the ability to fly. There are certain side effects, but luckily, they don't seem to stick around once the transformation wears off eventually. Number 6. Harley Quinn.
Hi, babies! Mommy's home!
Harley Quinn, or as she was formerly known, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, was once a psychiatrist whose life took a turn when she interned at Arkham Asylum. She was very easily manipulated by one of her patients because of his charismatic personality, which led to her eventually breaking him out of the hospital, and that's how Harley Quinn became the Joker's criminal sidekick. She soon became an accessory in every one of Joker's criminal activities, and despite him treating her horribly by constantly abusing and insulting her, she stuck by him. However, she was an important asset, and Joker understood that. Harley was an Olympic-level acrobat and gymnast. Along with that, she possessed impressive fighting skills. At one point, Poison Ivy injected Harley with a toxin, which enhanced her strength and stamina, along with making her immune to certain diseases. Her signature weapon that people most distinctly remember her by is an oversized wooden mallet. Her first appearance was in the 7th episode of Batman, the animated series, Joker's Favor, and she appeared in a total of 9 episodes throughout the series. Number 7. Lord Ventrix.
See you around, Batman. Too bad you can't say the same.
Even though Lord Ventrix appeared in 1 episode, he created his mark by having the one superpower most people wish they possessed, invisibility. Ventrix was an ex-con who also went by the name Mojo, and attained a suit that made him invisible. Before that, he was arrested, and his ex-wife had a restraining order against him, which prohibited him from seeing her or their daughter, but Ventrix had decided that a simple piece of paper wasn't going to stop him. He was eventually paroled and started working with a scientist. He would often steal samples of experimental plastic, and after some work, he had fashioned himself a full bodysuit that made him invisible, but it was still toxic to the mind and the body. Nonetheless, he went on to become his daughter's invisible friend. However, things eventually go south when he garners Batman's attention and then tries to kidnap his own daughter, which eventually leads him to be arrested and sent back to prison. Although he only appears in 1 episode of the animated series, he is later mentioned in another 2. Number 8. Count Vertigo.
In case you think that once I go, my disorienting effect will go with me, think again.
Count Vertigo or Vertigo is an Eastern European terrorist who has crossed paths with Batman after he meddled with Wayne Enterprises. He uses Vertigo-producing eye patch, which causes hallucinations and other mental illusions called the Vertigo effect. He first used this when Wayne Enterprises was transferring a sonic drill to Gotham City, and Count Vertigo was able to cause these hallucinations amongst the Gotham City Police Department and Lucius Fox, who was an executive at Wayne Enterprises. This is when he faces Batman and Talia al Ghul and is eventually defeated by them. Though his fate remains uncertain, he has only appeared in 1 episode of Batman, the animated series called Off Balance, which was the 44th episode of the first season. This character was voiced by Michael York and is typically a Green Arrow villain. Even though his appearance in the series was short-lived, DC's Vertigo is a rather famous villain in the comics.
You're quite right. I have been expecting you.
Number 9. Baby Doll.
Sorry I had to play Ross Tippy. I didn't mean to.
Marion Louise Mary Doll, more popularly known as Baby Doll, was born with systemic hypoplasia, a rare condition that kept her from ever growing, which meant that she would spend her entire life looking like a young girl. She had a small bout of fame when she was 20 and played the role of a 5-year-old in an American sitcom called Love That Baby. However, she eventually quit the show after she was convinced that a new character was stealing her spotlight, and she went on to become a dramatic actress but failed miserably, sending her acting career straight to the bin. After going through a severely depressive period of being rejected by networks, especially the one that launched her career as Baby Doll, she came up with a rather dark plan to keep her life as Baby Doll intact. She kidnapped the original cast of Baby Doll and tied them all up together on the set, along with TNT. She was ready to blow up the entire cast and herself. That's when Batman and Robin saved the day, and eventually, Baby Doll surrenders, and Batman ends up comforting her.
He wasn't spunky at all.
Glad to hear it, Muggsy.
Number 10. The Ventriloquist in Scarface.
Batman's so hot, let's see him swim Gotham Bay in concrete boats.
Arnold Wesker, or as we popularly know him as the Ventriloquist, was a criminal mastermind who carried a dummy named Scarface. He was a former ventriloquist in Gotham City who suffered from schizophrenia. Arnold eventually turned into a criminal and manifested his schizophrenia into the dummy that he carried around. Both he and Scarface, his dummy, embarked on a crime spree in all of Gotham City. Despite his eventual downfall, because of Batman and being sent to Arkham Asylum, he carved himself a new dummy after Scarface was reduced to dust. Arnold was eventually released from Arkham Asylum, and it did not take him too long before he started plotting his next plan, unwilling to stop. He even entered a phony partnership with Catwoman for one of his heists, which eventually led to Batman and Catwoman coming together and defeating him. He was once again admitted to Arkham Asylum. This villain appeared in a total of 6 episodes of The Batman, the animated series. The 59th episode of the first season was the one to introduce the ventriloquist in Scarface.
You don't talk, you get the...
Number 11. Red Claw.
You finally met your match, Batman! Not surprising, it's a woman!
Red Claw was a femme fatale villain that was specifically created for Batman, the animated series. Multigon International, which has its headquarters in Gotham City, served as a front for Red Claw's terrorist activities, which she used for her gain. The main agenda of her organization is to issue threats against powerful countries. Red Claw was the reason Batman and Catwoman were forced to put aside their differences and work together to stop her from killing millions of people by releasing a deadly plague in Gotham City. Despite being a villain who has the ability to take down several people, Red Claw possesses no superhuman powers, but she is a brilliant martial artist and was a natural leader, which proved perfect for the line of work she was involved with. She first appeared in Season 1 of Batman, the animated series, in the first episode of the show that aired on television, called The Cat and the Claw Part 1, which also introduced Catwoman. Other than that, she appeared in 2 more episodes of the series.
Let's go.
That was all in this video. Do hang around for more awesome content on everything that's movies, comics, and TV. Stay safe and have a good one.